Okay, so Indiana wins the national championship 27-21 over Miami. I think a lot of us before the season would never have believed that was going to be the case. Who was more likely to be in the game? Probably Indiana, based on what they'd done last year. But again, they'd kind of gotten blown out by Notre Dame in the playoff game. Certainly got blown out in Columbus at Ohio State last year. But here's the deal, man. They have a genius of a coach. He is, without question, the best coach in college football now. Curt Cignetti has stamped himself as that. The losingest program in college football history, over 700 losses, had 3 wins when he got there the previous season. They made the playoff the very next season. They won the title the season after that in year 2. 16-0. No other team in the history of the sport in modern era has ever been 16-0. Obviously, that's the expansion of the playoffs. LSU in 19, the famously historically great offense. Burrow throws for 60 touchdowns. They go undefeated. Could be the best team ever. Probably the most talented offense ever. Just trying to put this into historical perspective, ESPN was doing like the side-by-side of, Indiana's 16-0 and Yale from 1894 is 16-0. That's the other team to ever be 16-0. What are we doing with that? What are we doing with that? They didn't have helmets on. They didn't have helmets, period. They had like Yale vests on, sweaters. What rules were they going by? Like what formations? It's all triple option. What are we doing with the 1894 side by side to Indiana? Okay. I just thought it was funny because why even say that? And I get it. It's like, Rutgers, Yale, Harvard, Penn, the first ever CFB teams, like in the 1800s. You want to, I guess, pay your respects in a historical context, but to be 16-0 in the modern era is something completely different. Indiana's the first team to ever do it. I think I'll just say it as that. All due respect to the 1894 Yale Bulldogs. Okay. Indiana had only won 3 bowl games ever before this season. They hadn't been ranked in the top 10 in 57 years. They hadn't won the Big Ten title outright since 1945. They last shared it in 67. They have 3 Big Ten titles ever. 1945, 1967, and 2025. Here is the golden Cignetti soundbite afterwards. Quote, "I think we sent a message, first of all, to society that if you keep your nose to the grindstone and work hard and you've got the right people, anything is possible. In our particular situation in the athletic world, college football has changed quite a bit. The balance of power also. But we have the right people on our staff in the weight room, in the locker room, and we have great senior leadership and togetherness. And we had a really good quarterback that played his best when the chips were down." I can't get enough of this guy. I love Cignetti. How can you not love Curt Cignetti, love what he stands for as a 60-something-year-old guy who was on the Bama staff, took a chance, went back to a small school, built up JMU, took some of those JMU guys with them, Elijah Surratt, Aiden Fisher. Obviously, I love the story of Charlie Becker, a guy who was not a Cignetti recruit, but stayed with the program when Cignetti took over. By the way, he was a special teams player most of this season and last season, and then Elijah Surratt goes down with an injury for a bit later in the season. Back half of the year, he plays well, steps in, and then he is the hero of the Big Ten title game, and then he scores against Oregon, he scores against Bama, and he has the big back shoulder catch in this game. Dude, a couple of them, in fact. The 4th down back shoulders were so clutch from Mendoza. Even a 3rd and 7 late, midfield, they're up a score, up at 3. If they don't catch that Becker back shoulder, they maybe punt it. Dude, and then obviously we have to talk about, and there's a million thoughts in my mind. I'm going to get to Mendoza. I'm going to get to Sig. Like, the Mendoza run, when they're up 17-14 on 4th and 4, 4th down, and they call a draw play. They block it beautifully, and Cignetti said afterwards it was the same formation they'd called on the previous play, but obviously instead of a pass, it's a run. It's a draw play, and Mendoza just puts his body on the line. And he has been an underrated scrambler all season. They hadn't used his legs much in this game. He was using them to escape pressure, but not in terms of designed runs or even just flushed out runs that turned into big plays that has happened throughout the season for them. And then he comes up with the most iconic play in Indiana football history. I mean, probably. Certainly the most iconic play of the season in college football, and spins around, gets hit, stays on his feet, leaps for the end zone, takes another nasty shot to the back, extends the ball for a touchdown, doesn't even fumble it. I mean, the toughness on this dude, his arm was all scraped up. The shot that he took to split his lip earlier in the game, which was A, a targeting, and B, a very late personal foul hit on a defenseless player when he didn't even have the ball in his hands for multiple seconds. Like, how the refs missed so much tonight was, I'm glad that the game ended the way it did without the refs completely messing it up, because they messed up a lot of this game. That Indiana did not get a whistle for this whole game. I mean, there were plays where Charlie Becker and Surratt, their shoulder pads literally popped out of their jersey because Miami was yanking them so hard, the DBs were, and there were no flags called. I mean, it was incredible how much Miami got away with on defense tonight. Dude, the Becker catches, those multiple fourth down conversions, the Mendoza run, those were just clutch Heisman legendary drives. Like, if Mendoza doesn't convert those fourth downs and doesn't convert that fourth down with his legs as well, they might lose the game. Like, Miami, this was a classic Cristobal game. We're going to slam the ball up the middle stubbornly, and eventually it will work. And it was ugly for the first half, but eventually it did work. And I think one thing about Indiana is I'd always been fascinated with their ability to win the line of scrimmage no matter who they play. Ohio State could not run on them in the red zone in the Big Ten title game. Oregon couldn't do anything against them. Alabama couldn't do anything on the ground against them at all. They had 23 rushing yards. Alabama's been a bad running team all season, but it was still a dominant effort by Indiana. To see Indiana, again, without Stephen Haley, without Kellen Wyatt, two of the best D linemen in the sport, to still be that good against the run consistently all year long against every elite team they played was incredible. Now, I will say, so the trenches were won without question by Indiana in the first half. I will say Miami really asserted itself on the line of scrimmage in the second half. I mean, Mendoza was taking shot after shot early, but he kept taking shot after shot in the second half, and Miami's offensive line kind of started to move Indiana a little bit in the second half. Mark Fletcher busted that one long run. He finished with 117 total yards. They averaged 5 yards a carry, Miami did. I'll pull up the box score. They averaged 5 yards a carry, and Indiana only averaged 2.9 a carry, but Indiana still ran for 131. Miami ran for 110. Mendoza with only 27 pass attempts, and that's the story of Indiana's season, is they like running the ball way more than they like passing the ball. I mean, it's usually 60-70% run, as it was tonight, 45 carries, 27 passes. So, but Miami was kind of breaking through a bit with the line of scrimmage play, and you needed Mendoza to win it. Like in previous games, I mean, obviously Indiana blew out Oregon, blew out Alabama. You needed Mendoza to win this for you. The blocked punt for a touchdown obviously helped a lot. I want to shout that guy out. 6, Mikhail Kamara. Sorry, my thoughts are just all over the place. But Kamara, want to shout out 97, Landino. Obviously, everyone knows about Elijah Hardy, Aiden Fisher, D'Angelo Pons, Lewis Moore. Like, those guys are spectacular, have been all year. One other dude, Tyreek Tucker. He's been really good all year, too, but I feel like he was kind of under-discussed. 95 and 6. 46 was great, too, Isaiah Jones. But 95, 6, and 97 on the line of scrimmage for Indiana defensively. Like, there were so many plays where if they don't penetrate, beat a man, and make a tackle, Miami busts a long run or keeps a drive going. Like, those guys were incredible tonight. And again, that's without Wyatt and without Haley. And I love that Sig hasn't even brought that up, because those were arguably, I mean, Fisher and Hardy are probably their two most important players, along with Pons in defensively. But those guys are so important, and to be missing them to still be this good, I feel like is a kind of an under discussed element of this Indiana team. But getting back to like the big picture Indiana stuff, I think you have to just realize that like in college football now, anything is possible. Like, you talk about the turnaround of Indiana. No one thought it was possible. They're the losingest team in the history of the sport, and now they're the national champions 2 years later. A couple things have happened. Let's talk about like why that happened. A couple things have happened. First and foremost, Cignetti is the best coach in the sport. Bruce Feldman wrote an article last night, been covering the sport for 40 years. He says Cignetti's the best coach in the sport. I think it's really tough to disagree with that now that they won the Big Ten title and the national title. So that's number one. But also, the legislation as it currently stands is you can just go portal shopping, and anyone can do that, and everyone knows how to do that. And I will say, there are a lot of programs that are funded as well as Indiana and Miami. Miami's extremely well funded. There are a lot of programs that are funded as well or maybe better that didn't even make the playoff. Texas, Michigan, LSU. Those teams have as much money as anyone, to my knowledge, and they didn't even make the playoff. So it's not just the funding, okay? It's understanding legislation in college sports and how to adapt to that perfectly in real time. And what I really am drilling down to is that Cignetti identifies talent probably better than anyone, and he identifies the way in which that talent can help him win. And what I mean by that is Fernando Mendoza is 22 years old. Like in the Peach Bowl semifinal against Oregon, it was painfully obvious how much better, how much more experienced he was than Dante Moore. But Dante Moore is only 20. The lights were way too bright for Dante Moore in Atlanta. Way too bright. He gave Indiana the game. Mendoza, because of his experience and how great he is, he's obviously just a way better player than Dante Moore. But because of his experience too, being 22, 2 years older than the other QB, that's like a pretty big difference when you're that young. And so Sig has identified these older players. Now, Becker's young, but Surratt, older player. Omar Cooper Jr., older player. Hemby, the running back, fifth-year transfer from Maryland. Like, a lot of these guys are older players, Aiden Fisher, and that is kind of the secret sauce with Sig. Now, the other secret sauce is something I wrote about on my Substack, PrestonHighfield.substack.com. Check it out. Is the job's not finished mentality. When he finally cracked a smile last night, that was the first time I'd seen him smile all season. Now, maybe after the Penn State game, but you know what I mean? Generally speaking, and certainly in the playoff run, he didn't even crack a smile after they won the Big Ten title. Their first Big Ten title since the 60s, first outright title since the 40s. He didn't even crack a smile. No Gatorade bath. Have you guys noticed? No Gatorade bath until last night. And I am sure that's intentional. I'm sure he told his players and staff and everyone, don't you dare Gatorade bath me until we win the national title, okay? And then finally, for the first time in his Indiana tenure, they Gatorade bathed him last night, and he cracked a smile. That job's not finished. Chip Kelly, win the day, never satisfied, discipline, next play. Like, your team's almost robotic, but in a good way. That is his leadership style, and it works perfectly. That is the secret sauce of Sig, is the always disciplined, never satisfied, no smiling till the game's over. And you can just tell, like, Indiana's so much more disciplined than Miami. Miami was committing penalties left and right. By the way, that was a big false start on Smith, the Indiana first-team All-Big Ten O-lineman last night. When it was 3rd and 1, Indiana gets one more yard, they win the game, they can kneel it out, and instead, false start, moves them back. They have to settle for a field goal. By the way, I was kind of surprised Sig settled for a field goal there. Like, if you go for it, you win the game because Miami was out of timeouts or had one timeout left. If you go for it on 4th and 4, by the way, at Miami's, what was it, like 15, something like that? If you don't get it, they still have to drive 50 yards to get in field goal range. Their kicker had already missed one. Their kicker was, he was a mess against A&M. He missed the only one, or one of the only ones he took. He missed the only one he took last night. And granted, it was from 50 and it hit the crossbar, but still, or the upright, but still, like, I don't think Miami was exactly thrilled with their kicking situation. I'm kind of surprised. I would never, no one should ever question Sig, but I was just kind of surprised they didn't go for it on 4th and 4 to ice the game there from like the Miami 15 with a minute and a half left. That would ice the game had they gotten it, and they've been so good. But regardless, they settle for the field goal. They go up 6, and they force Miami to force the ball downfield, and Carson Beck ends up throwing that pick to lose the game. And, I'll get to the Miami side of this in a second, but just to continue with Indiana, I think what this win does is really pump that belief into any program. Like, if you are Penn State, it was a disaster this year, but if you have a new coach that you believe in and you have all the funding in the world, why not you? Seriously, why not you? If you're Oregon, you've been knocking on the door for that national title for so long, played in 2 title games in the last 15 years, was in the Final Four this year, obviously have won a handful of Rose Bowls and Fiesta Bowls, et cetera, in the last decade. Like, you've been so close for so long, knocking on that door. Why not you? Why not you? And I just think, I think if you understand what it takes in terms of alignment you need to be spending. You absolutely need to be spending, and you got to have the right coach. But you have to. I think the Cignetti approach is to recruit these veteran QBs, like he did with Mendoza. He'll do that with Josh Hoover, the TCU QB, who's been groomed, developed, and then he'll just plug and play him next year. Obviously, I'm sure he does a great job coaching the back shoulder throws and the sprint outs and everything that's involved with being the Indiana quarterback. But you get a developed player at the QB spot and other spots, and that is kind of the secret sauce for Sig. It would be really tough to pull off this turnaround if the transfer portal didn't exist. Like, if you're Cignetti and you have to just recruit kids straight out of high school, I don't think this turnaround is possible. But he's just playing by the current rules where you can grab players in the portal already developed and plug them in, and look what happened. So I just he's got the magic sauce, man. It's the discipline, it's the win the day, and it's recruiting veteran, already developed players. Like, how did it work out for Bryce Underwood this year to start at QB? He was a 5-star recruit, probably a higher ranked recruit than anyone in Indiana football history. It was awful for Michigan this year. Now, Sherrone Moore turns out was a mess of a head coach behind the scenes and probably on the field as well. But when you're a true freshman, is my point, it's really tough to be a really good college QB. Like, Mendoza's 4 or 5 years older than Bryce Underwood. And so that's the key, man. I think that's the key moving forward. And Oregon's recognized that to their credit. They had Bo Nix, after a ton of experience at Auburn, come in, 2 great seasons, Heisman finalist, won a Fiesta Bowl, brought in Dylan Gabriel after a long time starting at Oklahoma, amazing season, Heisman finalist, Big Ten champ, undefeated in the regular season and postseason until the Rose Bowl. And then this year, Oregon struggled a bit more at quarterback, right? Dante Moore came in. It was not good, folks. Oregon averaged, I looked it up, against their 6 best defensive opponents. Oregon averaged 18 points a game on offense this year. It was bad on offense this year for Oregon football when it mattered most. And I think a big part of that was Oregon was just nowhere near good enough or experienced enough at quarterback. And Indiana's the opposite. So yeah, man, it was an iconic performance from Mendoza, and that was the last thing to put a bow on. To put a bow on Indiana, as I've gone 19 minutes here, to put a bow on Indiana, Mendoza is also the secret sauce. I want to be super clear about that. Like, he is also absolutely the secret sauce. Their line of scrimmage play is incredible and underrated. Aiden Fisher, incredible player. Elijah Hardy, incredible player. D'Angelo Pons, incredible player. Lewis Moore, hard-ass hitting safety. Always in the right spot. Incredibly disciplined, incredibly well-coached. But Mendoza, all due respect to Curtis Rourke last year, shout out to the Mac, he took them to a completely new level this year. Now, Sig's system took him to a new level. Another year in the Sig system is what I mean to say. Surratt and Cooper Jr. back again. Becker emerging. Love the fullback, by the way, 37. He had a couple big grabs in the Oregon game. Scored their first touchdown in this game. But Mendoza really elevated them. I mean, his accuracy. There were plays in the Peach Bowl where Oregon covered Surratt perfectly, and Mendoza still threw it on the back shoulder. An Oregon DB was draped all over him, even had a hand on his hand or his arm. He still made the catch. Tonight, couldn't cover Charlie Becker much better. Mendoza still made the perfect throw. The fourth down conversions. The fourth down run, again, was just iconic. Putting his body on the line, and his scrambling ability is insane. I mean, dude, he's 6'5", 225 with incredible accuracy, really good arm strength, good running ability. It's not a fluke, man. That guy's going to be the number one pick and should be. He is really, really good. It's not a product. It's not just a product of Indiana. He was great at Cal last year. It's not just a product of Cignetti, although Cignetti's coaching, I'm sure, certainly helped. But, dude, he is great. And I just can't believe, there's that quote where Sark said, we'll probably never see a 16-0 team or an undefeated team in college football anymore. Indiana can shrug that off and say, what now? Because I think it helps sometimes to lose. Like, Miami lost twice, and I'll get to Miami next. Miami lost twice in the regular season. I think that actually helped them. I think it helps teams when they lose. Just gives them a little bit of an edge. Like, for Indiana to be this good, and I'm so glad they finished the job, man. It would have been a huge bummer had they not finished the job. Like, the greatest turnaround in sports history, and then they lose in the title game. That would have been such a bummer. But, man, and obviously full circle for Mendoza, doing it in his hometown, Miami. His mom, battling an illness. The cutaway crowd shots, ESPN, masterful job to the Mendoza family all night. Man, that was so good for college football, man. That was so good for college football. All right, let's get to the Miami side of this. So they fall 27-21, so close. Everyone wants to know, is the U back? It's the question that gets asked so often. I like Mario Cristobal's response, which, paraphrasing, he essentially says it's not really about if the U is back or not in terms of his goals as a coach. And we got to give Mario Cristobal a ton of credit. It was bad to start his Miami tenure. I got the stats here, got the season-by-season records. First year, 5-7, no bowl game in 2022. Second year at Miami, 7-6 with a loss in the Pinstripe Bowl. Third year, 10-3, Cam Ward. Couple of narrow wins, but they got him. But they lost in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. I believe that was to Iowa State. So you're going year one, not even good enough for a bowl game. Year two, lost in the Pinstripe Bowl. Year three, lost in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Not exactly is the U back material. But this year, lose twice in the regular season. The Louisville game was wild. Jeff Brom, great coach. Miller Moss, former USC QB, he got hot. Chris Bell, probably the most underrated receiver in college football. Tremendous player. Absolutely torched Miami in that game. They got out to a big lead, and they hold on to win 24-21. That was a Friday night game in Miami. The other Miami loss, Louisville was straight up better in that game. The other Miami loss was kind of crazy. It was at SMU. They won the game, but then committed a personal foul penalty after getting that final stop on that fourth down, roughing the passer. And then SMU kicks like a 50-yarder as the time expires to end regulation to tie it, and then they lose in overtime. Like, it was kind of a classic Cristobal head-scratching loss. Like, he's had a bunch of those in his career. A couple of famous ones at Miami where he didn't knee the ball. Famous one at Oregon for Stanford where he didn't knee the ball. he's had some serious head scratchers, but that was kind of a head scratcher. So they were technically not good enough to even make the ACC title game. They didn't play in the ACC title game. If you ask me, Jim Delaney, I think, is the ACC commish. Brother, you gotta redo your ACC tiebreakers. Because Duke bouncing Virginia in the ACC title game was a tough look. Let me make sure it's Jim Delaney. Oh wait, former commissioner of the Big Ten. Who is the ACC commissioner? Phillips? My bad on that. Jim Phillips. Yeah. I can see the guy's face. Okay, Jim Phillips. So, the first 3 seasons did not scream Miami was back at all. It was bad. That being said, this year, despite losing multiple times in the regular season, Mario Cristobal deserves credit, serious credit, for reinstalling seriousness, edge, swagger, physicality. They still don't have a ton of discipline. They're consistently one of the most penalized teams in the sport. Many Cristobal teams have been. But they have the swagger and the physicality that it takes to be an upper echelon team in college football. And then Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, man, those guys are arguably generational type talents. Like, I haven't seen many edge rushers like that in college football in the last 5-10 years. I mean, they are sensational players, especially Bain, but all them, Mesidor and Big 99, all that, their whole team really on the D-line. So their D-line and their physicality will keep them in every game. The U can't technically be back until they win a national title. But I don't even look at it like that. I think that's almost kind of an unfair way to evaluate their season and their program. Like, in this day and age, we all know what it is with the NIL and the transfer portal, and Miami was paying players before most were, just like USC in the early 2000s was, like the SEC notably was. Like, you're never going to – and Miami's paying a ton of money to a ton of players now. Like, the reported offer to Ty Simpson was $6.5 million to go play 1 year of college football there. People think Beck got 4 to 6. Like, they are going to hand out as much cash as anyone in the sport. So they will be moving forward, as long as those NIL checks keep cashing, and it seems like they will be up there consistently talent-wise with anyone, talent-wise. And, I think they caught a little fire this year in the postseason. I mean, they beat A&M 10-3 in a game that had no offensive touchdowns or no touchdowns, period, until, I think less than 2 minutes left or around 2 minutes left. Really, really, really ugly game in College Station. And then they played really well against Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. Had the pick six and just played really sound football. Beck played well, and then Beck played probably the best game of his career, or one of them, in the semifinal against Ole Miss, leads them down for the game-winning touchdown after Trinidad, a.k.a. Trinidaddy, takes the 27-24 lead. Beck leads them down to win it 31-27. He puts together a masterful drive and then runs the ball in with a minute left. In one of the best games for the U in 25 years. So it's really cool. I'll just say this too. It's really cool to have the U relevant. Seeing DJ Khaled and, the Michael Irvin thing's obviously getting a little old, but you just kind of laugh at it, keep it moving. All the celebs on the sideline. It's cool to see Cuban for Indiana on the sideline last night. Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, just everyone, that swagger in college football. Cristobal likes to say when the U's rolling, there's nothing like it. It's kind of true. From a pure swagger standpoint, there's really nothing like the swag of the U. It calls back, nostalgia, a hell of a drug, but one of the more stacked teams in CFB history, the early 2000s Miami team. I was watching again that replay where I think it was Chris Gamble drew the PI. That was the worst PI call I've ever seen, the one where they got screwed on in the title game in 2001, I want to say. That was absurd. I feel for the U in that one. But, it's cool to have the U back. That's my final kind of say. Are they all the way back with a full return to glory? No, not until they win the title. But I also don't really look at it like that. I just look at it as it's cool to have the U relevant in the sport of college football. Dude, if we're just going to keep handing kids $6 million to play QB and however much to play running back and receiver and line, they can hand out checks and bags with the best of them, so they'll be here. Looking into next year, who knows? It seems like Darian Mensah, it seems like they bought him out of his NIL deal, which is a crazy story. He had another year. He signed a 2-year deal with Duke, and they bought him out reportedly of his second year, and then we'll pay him money on top of that. So it seems like they spent like $10 million on Darian Mensah next year to be their QB. They have Mark Fletcher back. Obviously, they have Malachi Toney back. He was a true freshman this year. Could have been in high school, reclassified. So they'll be good. Their O-line and D-lines will be great. Obviously, they'll lose their stars on the D-line, but they kind of caught fire at the end of the season. But at the same time, it's tough to say they don't deserve to be where they are. I mean, a dominant D-line. And by the way, Indiana's D-line was arguably the best D-line in the country this year in terms of stopping the run. So it's no coincidence that the best D-lines are usually on the national title teams, and it's tough to say that the U didn't deserve to make the title game. I mean, I know that it wasn't pretty at times this year. Certainly wasn't pretty in the A&M game. They lost a couple times in the regular season, but by season's end, they went through Ohio State, beat them by double digits. They won on the road at A&M, who was one of the toasts of the regular season of college football. I think they were a little fraudy. Lost to Texas by double digits. That was the only real team they played in the SEC. So they're a little fraudy, but they were a good team. And then Ole Miss was hot as hell with Trinidad, in my opinion, the best QB in college football, along with Mendoza. They beat them. So, and they beat the hell out of Mendoza tonight. They beat him up. I mean, absolutely tattooed him. Like, beat him up, dude. The toughness on display for Mendoza was just remarkable. And Miami's a hard-hitting team. They're a physical team, and you can tell that Cristobal has stamped his identity on this team. And I think you got to give Cristobal a ton of credit for doing that. So I tip my hat to Cristobal. I tip my hat to the U. They are a force to be reckoned with. Are they all the way back? I don't think they would even tell you they're all the way back until they win a title, but they're here, they're relevant, which is so awesome for college football. And that'll bring me to my next topic, which is college football is absolutely thriving right now. After watching last night's national championship game, I kept thinking, number one, Fernando Mendoza, iconic run, legendary season. Curt Cignetti, greatest coach in college football, greatest turnaround in college football history, legendary. I also kept thinking, this is amazing for the sport and the health of college football. So much has been discussed around CFB of, the transfer portal's too wild. NIL is so unstructured. And I agree that the current environment of NIL regulations and legislation in general surrounding college football is unhealthy and unsustainable, largely because there is no league office in college football. You have conference commissioners, aka conference offices, like the SEC in Alabama, like the Big Ten in Chicago, and obviously you have the ACC in the Big 12, Big 12 in Dallas, ACC is in Charlotte, I want to say. Like, those are your league offices in college football. But there's not one uniform league office, and therefore those conferences are just going to be sticking up for themselves. Like, the SEC wants what's best for the SEC. Notre Dame wants what's best for Notre Dame. The Big 12 wants what's best for the Big 12. The ACC apparently didn't want to put Miami in the ACC title game. That was wild. That was wild at the time, and obviously proved to be extremely wild watching the postseason. But my point is there's a lot of mumbo jumbo around, like, oh man, yeah, isn't it just so stupid that this quarterback's making $5 million, or how crazy is it that Texas Tech's just openly handing out bags of cash and plucking NC State's best receiver, and A&M's doing the same, and Mississippi State's losing their best receiver to A&M. Like, and I agree, especially with the Darian Mensah stuff, the Damon Williams stuff. Some of it's it is ugly. Like, it's ugly. The kids aren't really experienced, or I don't want to say intelligent enough. They're not experienced enough to understand the real world, and therefore you have Damon Williams trying to back out of a $4 million NIL deal, which was completely illegal. You have Darian Mensah figuring out a way to get Miami to buy him out of his NIL deal at Duke, to buy him. It is completely corrupt. I am in agreement on that. But when you turn on the game on the field, it's basically never been better, and it's never been more wide open because Indiana football just won the national championship. They only won 3 bowl games in the history of their program until this year. They only won 2 conference titles in the history of their program dating back to the 1800s until this year. They won 3 games 3 seasons ago. Curt Cignetti got there overnight, took them to the playoffs. Second year, won them a national championship. Fernando Mendoza. The last Big Ten Heisman winning QB was Troy Smith in 2006. Before that, it was like the 1940s, okay? Wins the Heisman. Like, who would have thought it, even before this season, like, everyone was like, yeah, Fernando Mendoza was really good. Cal should have beaten Miami and Cam Ward last year. He's a good player. But no one was saying, yeah, he's going to win the Heisman and they're going to go 16-0. That would have been, like, as Sig said, it'd be a hell of a movie. Dude, no one would even believe this movie if you wrote it. And people would be like, yeah, that's too unrealistic, whatever, cut the grease. Now, I will say, with the current NIL structure and importantly, transfer portal structure, being able to buy kids who are older and developed, which is totally Indiana's magic method, by buying Fernando, who's 22, buying Josh Hoover, who will be 22 next season, bring him over from TCU when he's Indiana's starting QB next year, he'll be 22. So it's not as if Sig's doing this with high school recruits who suddenly became great players at 19 years old. Quite the opposite. He's doing it by poaching other developed good players. That being said, it's still an incredible turnaround. And my point by saying that is that, dude, if you're a program out there that has the NIL resources that Indiana does, and a lot of them do, you can win the national championship next year. College football is officially a year-by-year sport. There is no doubt about that. It's not get amazing recruiting classes, develop them, and 3 years from now, watch the fruits of your labor unfold, and you suddenly have a bunch of great juniors and seniors. It's not really how it works anymore. Obviously, recruiting high school players, I think, is still the backbone of most of these major programs. Dan Lanning has commented on that. It's still the backbone of most programs, but it's pretty clear based on what Indiana's done and based on what really everyone's done the last 5 years that recruiting juniors and seniors to play for you who are already physically developed, they're 21 and 22, that's going to win you a title faster than developing 3 years of high school recruits, especially at the quarterback position. You saw the massive difference in experience between Fernando Mendoza and Dante Moore in the Peach Bowl in the semifinal. Look at the last quarterback standing, right? Trinidad, Carson Beck, 5th-year senior, 6th-year senior, Mendoza, 22-year-old. And then you had Dante Moore, who's 20, and the moment was way too big for him. But the other 3 quarterbacks who were much more experienced all played very, very well. And so I think that's a big thing. Like, if you can recruit an experienced QB, and, Cignetti's an amazing coach. He's different. He's the best coach in the sport right now. So you have to acknowledge that. But, like, if you're Oregon, for example, I mean, hell, think about if you're Texas, LSU, or Michigan this year. You put a ton of money, and Clemson, ton of money into your programs. You didn't even make the playoff. So it's not as if money solves everything. You need the coach. You need the infrastructure. You need the buy-in from the top. You obviously need the environment and culture within your team. No doubt about all of that. But you you have a chance, and Indiana's proven that. So if you're Oregon next year, like, you may consider playing Raiola or going out, and it's too late now, but trying your best to get a more experienced, better quarterback than Dante Moore. If you are Texas, you got a really good one in Arch, who's continuing to get more and more experience. If you're LSU, obviously they got Sam Levitt. That's the perfect method, by a player who's already developed. So that is kind of the method. And with Indiana winning the title, man, anything's possible. Like, if you're Penn State, you probably feel like you can win the title next year. If you're Oregon, certainly can. LSU certainly can. I mean, think about how toxic it got at LSU this year, right? Brian Kelly, midseason firing. It was ugly. And then he turns around, or LSU turns around. They have Sam Levitt. They have Lane Kiffin. Add some more portal recruits. Add a good recruiting class. dude, they might be cooking next year. I mean, they'll probably be preseason top 10, maybe even top 5 with how great Levitt is and how great Lane is. We'll see what they bring back from that defense. But and then I'll also say, Nick Saban brought up the point. The rules in college football favor the Big Ten. That's a Nick Saban quote. The rules in college football favor the Big Ten. And I want to hit on that here because the Big Ten has won 3 straight national championships. Okay, so Nick Saban made some interesting comments on the College Game Day set prior to the national championship game that involved his theory regarding the Big Ten taking over as the dominant conference in college football over the SEC. I was watching it live, and I was good to see Ross Dellinger wrote an article about it. He's a tremendous college football writer, and I was wondering if this was going to pick up any steam because, first of all, great question, and great to hear Nick Saban talk about his theory on why his beloved SEC, certainly the best conference in college football for the last 25 years, has seemingly been taken over from the Big Ten. So the Big Ten has 3 straight national championships, right? Michigan, Ohio State, and Indiana, 3 different programs, which is maybe even more impressive. And then the SEC hasn't even played in the national title game in those last 3 years. Let's reverse it for a second. Went back, did some digging for y'all. The SEC won 7 national championships in a row from 2006 to 2012. Anyone doubting the SEC's greatness during that time was out to lunch, to say the least. The SEC won 13 of 17 national championships from 2006 to 2022. Again, by far, no close second, the best conference in the world. Also, if you look at the NFL draft talent evaluations and the sheer number of players drafted, I could pull those stats up for you too, but it is wildly in favor of the SEC. The SEC is certainly the most talented conference in college football during that run. Okay, even more interesting, I thought, Ohio State in 2014 is the only team to win a national title during that span from the North. So Clemson won 2, 16 and 18, and then Florida State with Jameis won that one. So 16 of those 17 national championships came from the Deep South. Alabama, Auburn, Clemson, Georgia, Florida State. And then you had that one outlier, Ohio State. It was without question the best conference in the sport. Now, the Big Ten has won 3 straight natties. So why is that? Nick Saban was asked, why is that? And he said, quote, rules favor the Big Ten. What he's obviously getting at is NIL compensation for athletes favor the Big Ten. If you think about it, the Big Ten has a bunch of tremendous universities with giant donor bases who are willing to invest in college football players and pay the players more than perhaps others. Now, Kurt Cignetti has said publicly our NIL is nowhere near what you think it is, and I believe him. I think Indiana now, Cuban's coming on, but I actually do think, like, if you look at their team, that's why it was so insanely remarkable what he did. It is a lot of JMU guys. Obviously, Mendoza probably got paid pretty well coming over from Cal, but it's a lot of JMU guys. It's a Maryland running back. It's, guys who transferred in from unheralded places after not playing much. Like, the coaching job has been all-time under Cignetti. No one would deny that. I want to, kind of continue on with the Saban side of things. Basically, he had a really funny quote that said, quote, "You'll never convince me otherwise when talking about why players from the South are starting to go to the Big Ten schools. Quote, because people in the South would not go to the North unless you paid them." And then, by the way, he followed that up with picking Miami to win the national championship game, which almost happened, by the way. They're a really physical team, arguably a more physical team than Indiana was in that game. But hats off to Indiana for finding a way to win. And, I mean, my take on this is that, yes, absolutely, the NIL wild rules are playing a huge part in why Tuscaloosa isn't raking in all the best players and stacking them, because pre-NIL, if you were a great defensive player, most of which are born in the South, Texas, Florida, and Georgia and Louisiana, those are by far the best states in America, by far the best states in America for high school football talent. California's good. Pennsylvania is actually good, but by a mile, it's Texas, it's Florida, it's Louisiana, and Georgia for high school football recruits. Okay, so all of those kids are staying in the South pre-NIL because they want to get coached by Nick Saban. They want to get coached by Kirby Smart. If you're a DB and money is more or less equal, why the hell would you go anywhere else other than Alabama or LSU and these days Georgia with Kirby? Like, why would you go anywhere else other than those if money's equal? Now, guess who Ohio State's best defensive player was last year? Caleb Downs. They bought Caleb Downs. Ohio State bought Caleb Downs off of Alabama. Period. Caleb Downs, that is probably the best example of a player who pre-NIL is coached by Saban and stays in the South, or coached by Kirby, or goes to DBU, aka LSU. But now that it's all about money, he's just going to go to Ohio State because he's going to get paid more. That is in real time a living, breathing, active player example of someone who is going to leave the South for money. Like, that's exactly what Nick Saban's saying. So until NIL legislation gets changed and you can just pay anyone anytime and buy them in the portal, I think the Big Ten has the upper hand. Now, it's a bigger question. How does it get changed? I think we all agree it's a little too lawless. There needs to be a little more regulation. Like, that's no longer even the topic. When they bring this up on game day and Herb Street chimes in and Saban chimes in, and it's that's not even, there's no disagreement among college football experienced folks like Saban and Herbie. It's more so, how does it get changed? My opinion would be that Trump and Saban go to Congress and find a way to legitimately get the Supreme Court or Congress involved to make bills such that, because the NCAA is, everyone talks about it, but it's true, it's kind of a spineless organization that doesn't have any real power. And I think that House versus NCAA settlement essentially settled that they don't have any power with regards to college football legislation. And every time they did try to do something, they would just get sued by a school or a player. So it's not even necessarily fully their fault because they would just get sued every time. So there needs to be a government-backed, protected, unified front office for college football that will install rules and regulations such that, the college football calendar at least gets fixed. You can't just buy anyone out of their contract all the time like Miami's trying to do with Darian Mensah right now, or like Ohio State did with Caleb Downs. So until that gets changed, though, yeah, the Big Ten can stake claim as the best conference in college football because they can buy the SEC's players because there's more money in the Big Ten. And I also want to say, like, while it's certainly a money angle, no doubt about it, I also want to give credit to Cignetti for being that brilliant of a coach. He is the best coach in the sport right now. Curt Cignetti is the best coach in college football. Indiana did not buy a bunch of 5-stars. We've seen that, it's famous at this point how few 4- and 5-star, aka blue chip recruits Indiana has on its roster comparatively to the rest of the college football playoff field. It was like 8 4-star guys, no 5-star guys. The rest of the field has like 70-something 4- and 5-star guys per team, basically, in the Final Four anyway. So Cignetti's coaching job is what got Indiana this title and Mendoza's true greatness, not just money. Ohio State, a lot of money there. Bought Caleb Downs, right? Michigan, a lot of money there. But hey, listen, until it gets changed, they're just playing by the rules, and I think Saban saw this coming. And he saw his grip loosening based on legislation of just pay anyone all the time. And I thought it was really funny. You'll never convince me otherwise because people in the South would not go to the North unless you paid them. And listen, it's probably true. But those are the rules right now. And as a result, the Big Ten can stake its claim with its third straight national championship as the best conference in college football.